everybody, Prepper003 here today with another SHTF scenario video for you. Now this one is going to be more of a short-term SHTF scenario than something that's a huge catastrophic thing that's encompassing the whole nation or the whole world. This is going to be something that's going to be much more localized to your city, area, county, or state, depending on where you're living and what's going on in that situation. But this is going to be, as you can probably guess from the title of the video, covering floods. And right now I know that a lot of us have experienced a flood once or twice. At least it might be something on a smaller scale or on a larger scale, on a overall situation, depending on where you live and the type of situations that you've been in your past or the areas that you visited. So right now I'm just going to kind of touch on the history of floods. All throughout multiple histories all around the world, there have been reports or legends or myths of a great flood or some type of catastrophic flood. Like, for example, with the Abrahamic faiths, there is the story of Noah's Ark. In Asia, there is the Great Flood that happened in China. All throughout Europe, you have the Greek, the Welsh, the Finnish, the Norse mythology. All throughout those type of histories and legends, you do have stories of floods happening. And even in Africa, like with the Kiowa tribe or the Mandan, they also have histories of a flood happening to their people as well. So right now, just all throughout histories and even up into modern times, there have been reports and a lot of flood incidents that have happened in the past, all the way leading up to the present. So now I'm going to touch on the types of floods that there are. So right now there is coastal flooding, which you normally see in the south of the United States, like along Florida and the Gulf of Mexico. Into that area, you see a lot of hurricanes and tropical storms hit up along that area, and they can even come up all along the East Coast, like you saw with Hurricane Sandy, as an example. So that's just a example of your type of coastal floodings that happen, or coastal surge floods. Then there is river flooding, and right now you've seen a lot of different types of river floodings all along the Mississippi. You've seen them happen in, like, around my area. There's been river floods. They're pretty common to happen. The main precursor to that is a lot of heavy rainfall, or maybe some type of dam or levee breaking that is along that river line. That's what can cause a lot of the baselines for a river flood. But just as an example of that, in September of 2013, along Colorado's Front Range, you saw a lot of river flooding there, for an example. Now we're going to get into surface flooding. And you normally see this in a lot of urban and city areas where the sewage and irrigation areas fill up from a lot of intense torrent rain. An example of this is going to be like the UK floods of 2007. That's just one thing. It's pretty much where you have a lot amount of a rain coming down and collecting and slowly building up into creating a lot of stagnation in just a high amount of water in those areas. And sometimes those areas can actually be in a kind of a bowl shape, to where, as far as the land goes, to where the water starts to come down the hills and just starts to pool and collecting. So that's just one more example right there of a type of flooding. Now, there's a lot of type of things that can happen with flooding, and there's also a lot of different other types of floods out there. Like, another example is going to be a offshoot of river floods or surface floods, and that's going to be like a flash flood. But I'm not going to get too much into subcategories, but I'm going to move on to the damages that come along with a flood. Now, of course, there's high water property damage that come along with that as well, and also damage to people's transportation. But one of the biggest things you have happen during a lot of floods is you have a lot of road washouts, as has happened up here in Wisconsin a lot. You also have blackouts, which is a major thing that happens, which cuts into another thing, which is a breakdown in communication without those floods being, without those electricity being able to flow to those cell towers, with that high water causing damages like we saw during Hurricane Sandy to the electrical system. You have a breakdown of communication even into the emergency systems and also into the basic civilian place, where you can't get a good cell signal because the cell towers are damaged. You're not able to have running electricity to where you're getting Wi-Fi signals to get messages out via the internet, and just other things along those lines as well. Then you also, as I mentioned earlier, with the property damage, you do have a lot of damage that can happen in a quick and very amount of time, even to where if it's a heavy flowing water system, you can even have properties and houses lifted straight up off of their foundation, which is something that's very damaging, and especially to a lot of preppers. That even if you store your stuff on the top story, you can have your house lifted right off its foundation and then just turned around. And then right now you've lost all your preps, all of your stuff, which can lead to homelessness. But another big thing is it has, with those damages to the roads and the roadways, and also with high waters, you can have a damage to transportation. So that disaster relief is going to be affected. The evacuation for those that decide not to leave during the evacuation warnings, if one was given, are now stranded there. So now what happens after a flood? And what happens to the people as the flood is going on? During the flood, you have a lot of things that can be going wrong. For that, you can have electrocutions due to downed wires, to circuits that are still running inside the house. Just a lot of things that can be going on that can cause you to get electrocuted just by being in a small amount of water. There's drownings, of course. That's something that's a given. When that happens, even in small amounts of water, if it's fast running, you can have a kid have their legs cut out from under them, and now they're drowning because they're being stuck in that high current water, and they're not being able to get up because they keep getting their legs swept out from under them. Another thing, like we did see in Katrina and other places like during Hurricane Harvey that hit in Houston, is you had a lot of people stranded and unable to move because of the floodwaters, and also because of the high amount of the floodwaters. So you could have that high current and the high floodwaters to where you can't get a solid footing and you can't swim against the current, and you can get washed out, or you can drown, or get cut, injured, and even attacked by wildlife. Another thing is that this is kind of more of the after effect, but this does happen, as I mentioned, with the house being able to be so severely damaged, you can have mass homelessness happen immediately as the flood's going on. So the flood may not have succeeded, but you have people that's homes have already been damaged and are pretty much unrepairable or unsalvageable. Now, what happens after the flood? As I mentioned earlier with the blackouts, those aren't going to be immediately fixed. As we saw during Hurricane Harvey, it took a long time for them to get the electrical system back up and running. So you can have blackouts for a large encompassing area for a long period of time. Now, it might not be long term like we're thinking for years on, but it could still take a month or two, like we did see with just an example when the hurricanes hit over in Puerto Rico. You saw a lot of the areas still without power months afterwards. Then there's also going to be, like we did see in Katrina, again for an example, is a rise of crime, home invasion, looting, and other things along those lines, even murder that can happen just because the police are having a hard time getting to certain areas. There's a cutoff in that transportation, so emergency services aren't able to get to you. You can have easy death just from a simple fall with not being able to get that immediately medical aid or have that communication available to those that need it immediately. And also with there being such a pretty much a strive and cut down in the medical system and the transportation to get medical supplies to the immediate medical areas, you can have a rise in sickness and disease, which can spread among areas, especially inside of like FEMA camps or disaster relief areas, to where you have a high amount of people staying in a very small encompassing area. You can have disease spread very quickly inside of those. And along with that, as I mentioned earlier, with the cut down in the transportation system and that cut down in disaster relief, you can actually have it to where the disaster relief isn't getting properly distributed. You can have a breakdown in the communication system between the different agencies, to where one agency might be thinking they're getting disaster relief, but that disaster relief never got it shipped out. So you can have just that huge breakdown in the disaster relief center, and you can pretty much see that fall through like we did see happen during Katrina under the Bush administration. And the last one is going to be some of the signs that you can look forward and kind of gauge on if a flood might occur. Now, one of the big things I'm going to say is going to be intense rainfall and continuous rainfall over a long period of time in your area. Monitor your radios, your water levels that are in your area. Like, try to keep, if there's constant heavy rainfall over a multiple day period, kind of watch your rivers and maybe your streams depending on where you're living. Also, kind of listen towards reports on the radio for local infrastructures like dams and levees. See if they're damaged or needing repairs. Maybe if there's a major crack or something like that, just kind of watch that and monitor that if that's being reported in your area. Another thing that I know a lot of you, especially in the south, like to watch for and to monitor is slow-moving storm systems like tropical storms and hurricanes. Just because whenever you have that slow-moving storm system moving in towards inland, the moment that it hits inland, it's going to slow down dramatically, causing just a constant amount of rainwater and even storm surge come through. That's going to really increase the amount of water along the coastal lines and even inland as well. And the last thing is going to be something that happens more up north here, but that's going to be a rapid or early snow melt, to where you're having a lot of the snow rapidly melt, which is going to be directing a lot of that overflow into the rivers, streams, and go downstream and eventually cause massive flooding, which has happened a lot up here in Wisconsin, just for something that's recent. So I really appreciate you guys watching. I want to hear what you guys think and some opinions that you have on a flood as a SHTF scenario. I know it's something that happens as a more everyday type of SHTF scenario, but it's still something if you're in a flood zone to prep for and prepare for and be able to have a proper bug-out plan set in place to prepare for a flood. Now I'm going to do a whole separate video on preparation for a flood and a bug-out execution in case a flood ever happens. But right now, just to keep the video semi-short here for you, I'm going to leave that to a whole separate topic. So again, thanks for watching. I want to know what you guys think of a flood and what type of disasters that can come along with that down in the comments below. So thanks for watching. Pepper003 out, and remember, prepare for today, survive tomorrow.